And they also built it themselves. They had a sawmill, so they used to get drift logs from down on the beach and drag them up the hillside. So all the interior walls, or most of them, except the stuff changes my parents made to it, they also sawed themselves, and they built it all from scratch. The stone walls on the outside, my grandmother built from stone on the beach. It was their retirement project. And I think it's always kind of like like my brother and I have been coming here since before my father came here as a teenager for the first time. My mother came here for the first time as a bride, and so there's always been a really strong sense of connection to this place. And um, I think also places that you love this much become sort of points of vulnerability, especially if you write about climate change. So when I do write my science fiction about climate change, and I've written a couple of explorations of it, quite often this neighborhood, the view across Saanich Inlet, is where I feel most vulnerable, where I see the changes. Even if you look in the woods, you can see cedar trees all growing on this property, and they're all heat stressed, and you can see the red flags that are hanging from their branches that are an indication of heat stress. As you could, if you go down on the beach right now, you can see all of the dead barnacles from the heat dome a few years ago. So many sea creatures died, and when you look down on the rocks, you can see all of the dead barnacles. You can see the barnacles growing back as well. But you really have between those cedar trees and the barnacles, you really have that sense of vulnerability. But you can feel that this how vulnerable this landscape is to a few degrees of change, some acidification, that kind of thing. And it's a house right on the edge of the water, so you can't help but think sea levels rise, and the erosion of a few atmospheric rivers and the erosion of the hillside, how much that's going to change things as well. Yeah, so it's very much the landscape of my dreams. I dream this landscape, and I have for all the time I lived in Ontario, and it's a landscape of vulnerability, and one I just love because I know it so well. The places that are really deeply embedded in your heart. Um, I had this wonderful feeling when I came back of just recognition, and it wasn't just the way things looked; it was the way things smelled. I remember I wrote a brief thing about it, but I remember lighting the fire inside and going out and eating an apple from the apple tree at the end of the house, which is a Spartan. And that wonderful combination of wood smoke and a Spartan straight off the tree was like this memory button that just dragged me back to being about 6 years old, which is a wonderful experience. I mean, people talk about climate grief that way, that it's not the entire world ending necessarily. That's obviously part of it, but it's the sound of the frogs you no longer hear in spring, or it's the stress on the cedar trees that's slowly killing them. It's those tiny changes. I mean, because those are the threads that really intimately tie us to a place, right? It's a particular species, it's a smell, it's a sound, that kind of thing, and those are so fragile and so easily lost. Yeah. So taking my kid down to the beach and flipping rocks, so we can look at you know whatever creatures are living under there. Yeah, and just hoping that I can kind of instill in him that kind of a relationship with the place as well. And sort of pay that forward. He never met his grandfather or his great grandparents who built the house, but the idea that they're still present, the way we haunt it. I mean, the walls, right? The walls were built by my grandparents. My father made those windows. Yeah, and it is something I want for my son. But you just wonder what this place is going to look like in 50 years when he's middle aged. I love secondary world fantasies, right? Giant sprawling Lord of the Rings type stuff. But there's something about a writer describing a place they grew up that has like an immediacy and a intimacy that I think is really powerful for a reader. I'm thinking some of the books that I loved as a kid. Yeah, and I don't know if there's a way to, like, I think that only comes from a long-term relationship with a place. I put my slipcase box of the Narnia books in my son's room, trying to get him to read them, but he found them a little scary, which I did at first as well. So, we'll try them in a couple of years. Yeah, and that's it too, because I mean, I still remember where I was when I read particular books. Um, and I used to read outside all the time. So, yeah, I think it's those long term, well, yeah, and that's books too. The long term relationship you have with a text. I read Middlemarch for the first time when I was 19, and then I read it in my 30s, no, 20s, 30s, 40s. And the way a work that's that capacious and beautiful and generous can be something you grow up in the same way you grow up in a landscape, right? That you're changing relationship, you're changing understanding of that story. Yeah.
You get different things out of it at different points in
Oh,
life.
exactly. Which I love, right? That you can come back to it and be like, huh, that guy I thought was such a dreamboat that first reading is an absolute dick. I'm in the process, the very excruciating, like last 10% of a novel I've been working on for like an embarrassing amount of time. So I'm trying to it's been through my agent and my writing group and some other people, and I'm just pushing that through. It's my big sprawling Trans-Canada. It starts on the East Coast before the First World War, and then Toronto in the 70s, and then ends in Victoria in the 2040s. So I'm trying to finish that, but I tend to avoid work by doing other work. So, so I also there's always stories floating around. I've been trying to write one about a UFO abduction in Cobble Hill for the last gazillion years. So I still poke at that a little bit. Yeah, I tend to be kind of restlessly going from project to project, working on something until I hate it. And I've taken it to that next stage and you just hate it. The last 10% of anything is just horrible. Yeah, so yeah, and all of those projects are kind of slowly coming to term, and I'm hoping the novel will be done soon, and then I can full attention to the UFO abduction novella, and then I sent a novella off 2 weeks ago to a magazine, which I have hopes for. So yeah, yeah, always weird fiction, ghosts, aliens, all of the good stuff, but very much grounded in the Cowichan Valley or on Saanich Inlet right out there.